Is personal style truly dead, or has celebrity obsession just completely killed fashion as an art form? One of the most frustrating things about the fashion industry to me today is how all of the opportunities just go to hot people with a lot of followers instead of going to people that actually have a unique perspective and something to say about fashion as an art form. This is what I love about Minale. Whether it's creating a 10-page research document on the rise of dupe culture, studying the history of modernism, discussing how different pieces of media have influenced our perception on certain aesthetics. This is what I mean when I say having a perspective on fashion. Something I always say is that art shapes culture, culture shapes people, and people shape the world. And fashion is one of the only pieces of art that we consume on a daily basis and consistently engage with. Like, I might watch a movie today, but I had to get dressed in the morning, and I will walk around and see the outfits and styling choices of dozens of other people around me. It is one of the most defining tools of self-expression and a tool for creativity and self-discovery. So it breaks my heart when I see this, given all the best opportunities in this artistic field. And my goal is not to come across as mean to any of these people, but to show how amazing of a tool that fashion can be for developing a sense of confidence and building an artistic persona when you have that perspective. So when did this concept of personal style die? Why did the pinnacle of fashion go to just becoming filled with hot people instead of rewarding people who actually have something interesting to say about fashion? People who have actually researched and are capable of building that knowledge and sharing that knowledge with the world. Well, that is exactly the question we set out to solve here today. This entire video is inspired by a recent YouTube video Mina made called The Death of Personal Style. And if you are a long-time watcher of the channel, you know that Mina is like one of, if not my favorite YouTuber. And I think that this is one of the best videos she's ever made. It was so interesting to hear her perspective, and I think there's a lot of things that I really agree with and a lot of the takes that she had, but also a few things I disagree with. And I would like to clarify, I am not a fashion expert. I have not studied fashion like that. I am more interested really, I think, in almost like this marketing and culture behind it. I mean, again, talking about pretty much the only two forms of art we consistently engage with on a daily basis are fashion and music, which is why they're kind of two things that I always think about, especially in the way that they influence our world and the culture around us. And then again, that culture is influencing people. So when thinking about this rise of, I guess, just like minimalism and basicness, or just thinking about how is an industry with all of this money and resources centered around now, like only rewarding, I think, people who don't actually contribute a lot to said industry. So like, how did that business come to be? Why is the marketing like that? And I think there's a lot of really interesting, both like research, but also cultural phenomena that really goes into this, and some things that, again, that I agree with and some things that I disagree with. So with that, welcome back to Nicky and I. I'm your host, Nicky Reardon. I don't know, I was really excited to talk about this week's topic. I was just that. Every once in a while, I watch a video essay that just like lives in my mind. Like I can't stop thinking about it every single day. So when that happens, it's one of my favorite things that I have this platform with this little group of you guys that I get to share that with. So with that, please follow us on Spotify. Oh my God. We are so, we hit 1,000 5-star ratings. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh my freaking God. We've been chasing that goal for so long. Y'all crushed it. I was literally rewatching one of our videos we made back in like September, and we only had like 200 ratings. So holy crap, you guys are insane. And if you haven't given it a 5-star rating yet, check right now. 10 seconds of your day has the potential to completely change my life. And it's so frustrating how much, Apple Music ratings and Spotify ratings really matter for growing your audience. And also, we are so close to 2,000 subscribers. Oh my God, we are so close. My goal has been 50K by the end of the year. I think we're at like 43K, which means that we have to grow 7,000 subscribers in less than 30 days, which is a very ambitious goal, but I think it is within the realm of possibility. So share this with a friend. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Also, we launched a Discord. I don't know, I forgot to announce that. I think in last week's episode, I posted a little community tab about it. I'm literally in there chatting every day about music, about art, about pop culture, about cool marketing stuff. We were talking about the Grammy nominations when all those came out. Like, if you're into any of those conversations, you will love coming and chat with me. It's literally so much fun. So with that, let's dive into this concept on the death of personal style, or really, I guess I want to say like sheepism, groupthink that has centered centered around fashion, and how much we see these rapid rises of cowboy core and then coquette core and then mafia wife, and like trend cycles are constantly moving without any real substance or thought or meaning behind them anymore. So with that, I kind of wanted to define what do we mean by personal style? Iris Apfel in a 2016 interview said, "I think most people don't know who they really are. They feel secure if they look like other people, or it's the look that everybody says is in. People agonize over the way you look." And I think what this really means to me is that a lot of the time, fashion is about feeling like a part of a group or identifying with a specific group of people. You can see that again with just talking about this concept of trends and wanting to be perceived as in. But also I think there is this idea of defining you with a group. I think you can go all the way back to the mid-century, the 1500s, and how kings and queens used to wear these elaborate fabrics and these really rich colors and purples, and that was designed to be a symbol of wealth. It was designed to show we are a part of the noble class, because at the time, those materials were so expensive and difficult to access that in order to have them, you had to be rich nobility. So they dressed a certain way to show they were a part of rich nobility. And I think you can even see how this transfers today into this rise of the quiet luxury aesthetic and this obsession with the way you look being a status symbol. Again, the entire business of luxury brands like Prada and Fendi, or literally any designer ever, is not that they're selling a purse that actually has $2,000 worth of leather. It's that this brand is exclusive and hard to buy and can only be worn and afforded by this certain class of people. Therefore, buying that object makes you feel like you are a part of that certain class of people. And I think even just talking about this concept of fashion to identify with a group, almost like a badge of honor. I think you can even trace this back to things like hippies. In the 70s, this dressing like a hippie meant you were anti-war. It was actually fashion became this symbol of a political ideology, of a life philosophy, and how, there has always been these different movements in that way. Again, you can say this with streetwear in the 90s and this very overt color and these oversized denim and things like that. Again, it was a part of this group. Or, I think you even think of subcultures, right? How skaters dress a certain way or have worn certain brands historically, like Vans and Converse, you know what I mean? But then you can compare that again to this quiet luxury or a brand like Polo Ralph Lauren. They're very different from one another because they are meant to signify different groups of people or different lifestyles of different people. And again, even in more modern times, talking about fashion as a symbol of an ideology, I think one of the most insane recent examples is the MAGA hat or the Harris Walls hat, right? It's not even a fashion piece. It is something you're wearing to show your belonging to a group, right? Music merch, sports merch, jerseys, all sweatshirts, all of these things, beyond them being fashion pieces, they are meant to show a belonging to some sort of group or a hobby or a passion. And this is also something called enclothed cognition, which Mina discussed in her video, which I thought was so cool. In this 2012 study from Northwestern University, essentially talking about how the way you dress actually has psychological effects on your mood and productivity. One of the things they had tested was people wearing lab coats actually had proven efforts of boosting performance, whether that was studying or working for a certain amount of time. And I think that goes through with all things, even I think of getting dressed up for the gym. Sometimes there is the beauty of that ritual of being I am dressing in this way that makes me feel confident and excited about my body. So then when I'm going to this place to work on my body, I'm going to work on it harder. There is this really fascinating thing. Again, I'm a big believer that large physical changes lead to big emotional changes in any and all things. And I think, again, as fashion being this one of the most exterior pieces of art we engage with and we embody on a daily basis, it improves and affects our mood arguably more than one of the most out of any other art form, again, besides music, which we all know I'm obsessed with. That really brings me into this marketing of fashion and how brands have really always known that and used this throughout history. One of the big ways is through this halo effect, which is this psychological principle that essentially says if you identify with this thing, people will assume you have similar characteristics of that thing, even if it's not true. The classic psychological example that they have tested, and I've talked about on this channel before, is people being hot and people being funny. It is so crazy how like they've done tests where like hot people deliver a joke and then a very average person delivers a joke. And if it's the exact same thing, like people will score the hot person as funnier simply because they perceive them as attractive. And brands, fashion brands especially, have always done this. One of the classic examples I think of is those like Abercrombie bags, right? Where it was like a very hot man wearing like just underwear on the bag. So you see a hot person wearing Abercrombie, therefore you think if I wear Abercrombie, I am hot. That is a classic example of the halo effect. Another really a brand that built their ideology off of this, especially in these early 2000 body standards, was Victoria's Secret, right? Their Victoria's Secret fashion show was really, I think, even more than like, I'm not sure they were selling more product than they were, spending on those massive fashion shows with these A-list supermodels. But it was creating this persona that the most beautiful women, the most thinnest women wear Victoria's Secret. Therefore, if you want to be a beautiful, thin woman, you should also wear Victoria's Secret. And this has contributed to a lot of crazy body standards, which is something we'll talk about later in the video. But this halo effect, again, has really always existed. And I think in the vacuum, like we don't really have supermodels anymore the same way we did in the 90s and early 2000s. So they replace that with influencers, with these Alex Earl type girls who I'd say aren't necessarily known for like a specific taste or perspective or style on fashion, but are just these beautiful women. And that is why they use this halo effect on them. Or even another thing I thought about recently, actually, one of the things that sparked this entire thought line for me was Vinnie Hacker was like the face of a Loewe campaign and was like front row of the Loewe fashion show. And don't get me wrong, hot man. Hot. The things I would do to him, unspeakable. They would be studied by priests for decades to come. But like, what does he know about Loewe? Like nothing, right? Like he's like a gamer and like is not at all known for any taste or things he has on fashion. And like, even if you look at his Instagram, I wouldn't say that he's like known for a specific taste. And even when I compare someone like a Vinnie Hacker to like a Noah Beck, two people who I think kind of came up on the internet at the same time for relatively similar things. Like, when I look at Noah Beck, I do think that he at least has like style or taste or like understands what he's doing in some way. Like I look at his outfits and I'm like, wow, like I would wear that. So at the very least, I do understand to a brand, they kind of see him as this like classic boy next door figure and why that is like desirable for a fashion collaboration, whatever. But like Vinnie Hacker, again, it just doesn't make sense. He's literally just hot. It's not fashion, they're just hot. Is a very interesting through line you'll see in a lot of the things I'm about to discuss. And I mean this again, not as like me trying to hate on any of these people. Like if I got offered that opportunity, hell yeah, I'd take it too, girl. Like that sounds fun, like of course they are. I think what's more interesting to me is this ideology of the industry, this ideology of we are not going to reward people who engage in like really interesting fashion journalism, have studied this thing as an art form or have a very unique, specific point of view. And instead, we are only going to reward these very conventionally attractive people. And going off of this, one of my favorite quotes from Sally Singer is, if you're interested in fashion, learn about everything except fashion. Politics, history, art, whatever. And I could talk about this quote for so long. Oh my God, I think it is so interesting. And I think this applies to more than just fashion, but all forms of art. It's like one of the classic examples I think of is like Lana Del Rey, right? Like you can tell that this deeply rooted knowledge of like Americana and these aesthetics and American history is her core aesthetic of her music, even like down to the lyricism, to the music videos, everything. Like she became most known for an artist for doing something outside of her medium because it gave her a unique perspective. And if she had tried to just, do the Britney Spears thing or whatever that everyone else was doing at that time, I don't think Lana Del Rey would have been blown up the way she did at the time that she did. And I think what's interesting is that not following these trends all the time has made her timeless. Like if you are constantly chasing a new thing, you are a victim to whatever that new thing is. But when you romanticize this era of the past, whatever that thing is, it is timeless, Like if you love the 60s fashion or 70s fashion or 90s or Y2K, whatever, like those things will always be what they are and what they were. Like history has already been written. And that I think is so fascinating about this quote. And even I think now you see someone like a Chappell Roan, and how she's constantly referencing these things. Like her dressing up as a Statue of Liberty for a Gov Paul performance and coming out in this giant apple. You know, it's camp, it's self-aware, it's reminiscent of Lady Gaga and Madonna, but it is something current to her, right? Like drinking or coming out smoking a blunt and performing at a New York festival, like especially in the era she's in right now, like is such a unique perspective. Taylor Swift would never do that. Beyonce would never do that, right? It's something that feels unique to Chapel. And I think it's, again, talking about this concept of building artistry, which I talk about in pretty much all these videos at this point. Art exists in more than one medium. And again, art shapes culture, culture shapes people, people shape the world. And if you want to have this impact on people, then you do need to be willing to study the art and culture and history behind it all. And I think you see this with tons of brands too. Again, great marketers don't sell a product, they sell an emotion. And I would argue one of the best brands at doing this is Erewhon, because eggs are not worth $12. Nobody wants to spend $9 on a bottle of water. They aren't selling that. What they are selling is this idea of status, this idea that I shop at this all organic store and I can spend, I don't even look at the price of these eggs because I am comfortable. I'm financially stable. I can spend $20 on a smoothie. Like, they aren't selling $20 worth of ingredients in a smoothie. They are selling this feeling of perceived status. People out there feel like they are a better or more successful person because they can do that regularly. And I would say you see this even in fashion too. Like another great example, again, talking about Polo Ralph Lauren. Like they have built this old money aesthetic, right? Like they are really classy and this feeling of luxury, and all of their marketing is meant to cater to that, right? Like you see them doing these activations or bringing creators out to tennis matches or golf tournaments, not to a basketball game or a soccer game, because those things are associated with and personified with this feeling of like class and wealth and status or whatever in some way. And what they're selling with a pair of Ralph Lauren chinos versus a pair of Dickies chinos is Ralph Lauren embodies this feeling of luxury or status. So wearing that makes you feel more luxurious. Again, also talking about like any designer brand ever, like that is what this entire industry is built off of. It's built off of identifying emotion, selling that emotion. Again, I mean, that you could look at this like dating apps like Tinder. What they sell is this feeling to the solution of loneliness, you know what I mean? Or this feeling of validation where 99 people like you or 17 people liked you that day and you can see who's hot in your area, blah, blah, blah. Like they're kind of, dating apps are notorious for not really working that well, but people all consistently use them. Why? Because what you're getting out of it isn't love and true romance. What you're getting out of it is that feeling of emotional validation. And great marketers know this and they use it to their advantage all the time. And fashion, again, is one of the biggest proponents of that. To quote Mina in her video, "Your self-worth in the fashion industry is tied to your ability to sell a product. The more basic you are, the more of a blank slate you pose yourself as, therefore, the more marketable you become because you are more malleable to the brand." And I think that that is a really interesting phenomena, that maybe these brands don't want somebody with a specific style and POV, because if they have that, then they can't mold you to whatever the theme of that collection is or whatever they want you to look like or how they want you to think and act, whatever. And it's very common that like creator or influencer is supposed to conform to the brand's look if they are, you know, attending a fashion show. And it's very common for them to have their outfit and pieces entirely picked out by the brand. But what that shows to me is that you are not there for your taste. You are there to be marketing a product. You are a mannequin, right? Like you're not there for your own taste. You are literally a mannequin that is alive. They want people to look at you and see the product on you. And there's also this interesting thing in just all marketing and advertising that you cannot critique the product, because if you do, then you are blacklisted or the brand won't work with you, right? It is such a weird phenomenon. I talked about this a lot in the influencer brand trips episode, where I think a lot of the times that these brands engage with these people is not even to necessarily get them to sell a product, but it's almost like an insurance policy. It's almost like, hey, if I invited you to the past 3 Balenciaga shows, and then Balenciaga had that huge scandal last year or the year before, those people didn't talk about it, right? Like a great example, Kim Kardashian, face of Balenciaga, been paid a fat check by Balenciaga. Balenciaga has a huge scandal. She says quiet about it. Didn't say a single thing. Why? Because she is financially incentivized by the brand. And this exists not just even in the influencer creator perspective, but in these big publications as well. You know, like Vogue makes its money because of fashion advertisers, right? Like that is their biggest revenue stream. So they can't always critique these people in the way that they want to. And that is this really interesting dark side of marketing and also just in general media literacy. Like you should always be skeptical of creators in that way. You know, even me, like I'm not immune, like nobody is immune to that. You know what I mean? Like there is always going to be this interesting thing that when you are a facet of being a product for an advertisement, that you are subject to bias in all forms. And I think this is a really interesting thing too. Again, talking about Mina's statement about your worth in the fashion industry is tied to your ability to sell a product. I think there's a lot of interesting thought to this. Number one, I think it's why you see this constant perpetuation of new aesthetics like cowboy core, then mafia wife, then trad wife, then blah, 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 blah. Like if you only do one thing, you can only sell one sort of product or one category of product. But if that's constantly changing for you every single month, there's a lot more money in that. There's a lot more time in that. And that's, again, even outside of fashion with beauty, you know, somebody talks about how they're constantly changing their skincare routine or blah, blah, blah. Like, are they? I don't know. I feel like that's like the type of thing people generally get pretty opinionated about a product for, you know? Like I know the moisturizer I use and the cleanser I use and the sunscreen I use. Like I found those products. I love them. I don't see myself ever stop using them in the foreseeable future. And it's one of those things that I just really dislike about the beauty industry online is like these people are always financially incentivized to lie. It doesn't mean they are lying all the time, but it means that the financial incentivized to speak nicely of a brand, to make videos about the brand is always there and it is always prevalent. And I think when you talk about, you know, fashion being your ability to sell a product or your worth in fashion being your ability to sell a product, one of the first people that pops in my mind is Emma Chamberlain, because she is, again, one of the first, I think, big influencers to be taken seriously by brands, you know, like coming out of this YouTube era, like 2016, 2017. I remember when she was made like the poster child of Louis Vuitton. And then she was the first creator to ever host the Met Gala. And what's interesting about Emma is she was, I think, the first time the fashion industry realized that she kind of just personified the teenage girl of that time. Like she was so quirky and relatable and she was making coffee on camera and she hated school and she, you know, like something about her really embodied what the Gen Z female was. And because of that, they realized, okay, well, like if we want to be perceived by the Gen Z female, then like we make this person our poster child. And a lot of people who do well in fashion are people who you can really surmise as like being the blueprint of something. And again, when you talk about this, you know, like Alex Earle being in fashion, which is interesting to me. Again, like I don't think I hate Alex Earle by any means, but it's just like I don't think of her as like a fashion icon per se. Or like Hailey Bieber is one of the ones that really is like so fascinating to me. Like there's this obsession with looking like Hailey Bieber. But anytime I see her outfits, I'm like, this is a black leather jacket, a white shirt, and blue jeans. I'm not saying she looks bad, but I just don't get what the obsession is with looking like her specifically. Like if you walked 15 minutes in any direction, you would see 18 bitches who look exactly like that. Like exactly like that. So when people are like obsessed with recreating the style, I'm just like, you're recreating something that like it's just out there in the world already. But this recent criticism of Emma Chamberlain blows my mind because she used to always get shit on for being too basic, right? Remember when she was the scrunchy girl and the Doc Martens and Visco and like was the poster child for like what the inside of an Urban Outfitters looked like at that time. But now she has developed a personal style. The key word being personal. It's for her. It's not for you. People are hating her haircut. People are hating the things she's buying. They're talking about, oh, you used to look better, used to this, blah, 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 blah. It's a personal style. Like, it's not meant for you. If you don't like it, don't recreate it. You know what I mean? Like, you can go dress like Hailey Bieber or whatever if you want. Like, there's not a right or wrong answer or a one-size-fits-all solution. And that is, I think, what is so interesting to me about this criticism of her. And also what interests me in this, like, fashion pipeline she's been put through is, I would argue at the time she was really getting picked up by these major brands and whatnot, she didn't have a crazy unique perspective on fashion. She was the poster child of what this, classic teenage girl acted like, sounded like, liked in that time. But as time has gone on, I really do think she has developed one. Like, she has really built an interesting perspective of like what style is to her. And I actually like her personal style a lot more now than when she was arguably at the peak of her popularity, 5 years ago or whatever. And it's interesting that she's getting more criticism now. And I think that's because she doesn't look like the norm anymore. And people who love the norm or want to look like the norm perceive that as bad. And again, fashion is meant to be this tool of self-expression. Like, there's no good or bad. You don't have to marry an ideology, and your opinions and how you express yourself should be subject to change over time, over age, with emotional status, with relationship status, all of these things. Again, talking about when we get to, like these basic girls, like the Alex Earls, the Hailey Biebers, and the Sophia Richie. I really do think a big piece of this ties to the death of the supermodel, and that supermodels being on magazine covers and whatnot is not really like a thing anymore. We don't really care about supermodels in that way. So they are the new version of that. And they do personify this concept Mina refers to of the blank slate. Like, it's just, they're beautiful people, and they want to use this halo effect with them, and they know that they have some deep parasocial relationships, truly. So brands, it's very easy to dress Alex Earl for a thing, right? Like, if you look at the way minale looks versus the way Alex Earl looks, like, you can put a lot more things on Alex Earl that are gonna look good. And you understand that she appeals to this concept of like the white Miami party girl, the pretty blonde girl, the sorority girl. Like, I understand who Alex Earl's audience is. You know what I mean? Like, I bet they love every season of Love Island and The Bachelor, and like I don't know, I can just build the persona profile for that person in my mind. Same with Hailey Bieber. And I do see why a brand wants to tap into that because it's a large audience. But what's sad to me when we're looking at fashion as this art form and tool for self-expression is that they're not pushing the narrative of fashion forward. And when I think about people on the internet who have done that really well, two names that instantly pop to my mind are Wisdom K and Drew Joyner. Starting with Wisdom K, like, he is one of the biggest fashion creators on TikTok, and thank God finally got invited to the Met Gala for the first time because he has a unique perspective on fashion. Like, he's not just a basic boy. Like, I really do think he understands these things and thinks about these pieces. And I also love that one of the big ways he got his start was combining elements of fashion with elements of culture that we all know and love already. Like, I remember him recreating outfits like SpongeBob characters or Harry Potter or different anime characters. And like, that was so cool to me as somebody who loves nostalgic cartoons, somebody who's obsessed with anime. I watch so much anime. I don't talk about it on this channel, but I'm obsessed with anime. He really built this bridge, and I thought that was cool because he popularized that format, and that format can get people who aren't interested of the world of fashion into fashion by using this piece of media as a conduit that they're already passionate about to discover this new tool of creativity and artistic expression and build confidence in yourself. And I think that that's a really cool thing for young men to see in a person like him. And that's why I'm like, I want him to be front row at the wave. You know what I mean? Like that, like when I think about that again, like comparing a Wisdom K to a Vinny Hacker, like Wisdom K has a unique perspective. He has knowledge. He has an expertise that should be rewarded and uplifted more. And then also Drew Joyner, who is a YouTuber, and I think I discovered him on Instagram, but like the thought out research about fashion is so cool. Like he just made this video one time, I think it was like comparing like just how denim was made over every single decade and why we feel like these pieces of denim that we find at thrift stores and vintage and like old Levi's are such amazing quality. And like, that is so interesting. It's educational. Something I always love and really resonate with is that I'd say like opinions are fleeting, but education is timeless. And as a creator myself, that's why I really pride myself on like making educational content, or at least trying to try everything I do back to education, because those things like that are, again, it's timeless. It will never go out of trend. Like it's interesting to know these things and delivering a unique perspective. And again, like it makes me sad that someone like a Drew Joyner isn't like getting some of these amazing opportunities that I think are really, really cool and interesting. Or like another person I thought did it really, really well was Nicky Tutorials, which is interesting because I wouldn't say she is known for fashion. She is a huge beauty creator, but fashion isn't really what she's known for. But when she was invited to the Met Gala, her entire outfit was inspired by Marsha P. Johnson, who was the trans woman who threw the first brick at Stonewall. And Nicky Tutorial is one of the largest trans creators on YouTube. So like her doing that reference was like specific to her community. It was a clear knowledge of like old art and culture and history, and it meant something. It was her using her perspective and her audience to make a statement in a way that was meaningful. And I think that's just what I want. That's what I want from these fashion creators. Like I think that fashion is such a beautiful tool for art and again, like I feel like I'm repeating myself, but building confidence and all these things. And when I see people without these perspective given these grand stages, it just makes me sad because I feel like it's a wasted opportunity. It's a wasted opportunity that could have gone to someone who could really push that narrative forward and teach people and excite people. And even again, talking about someone like Minale, obviously I'm biased, I'm literally obsessed with her, but like, yeah, she has a less following than Alex Earl in terms of numbers. But I think that 1 million people that watch her YouTube channel compared to the 7 million people who watch Alex Earl on TikTok, like, the 1 million people in Mina, like if you have watched her do a 40-minute video talking about the historical accuracy and the dresses of every Disney princess, you have to care about fashion to such a level that I think she would actually have a higher conversion rate among that community. And I think brands look at size and scale more than they look at quality of content and expertise. And this is a thing that is killing them. They just see numbers and think that numbers translates to depth of connection, but that cannot be further from the truth. Again, not all connections are created equal. The depth of the connection matters. And having somebody with a specific point of view or expertise on a subject, they should be rewarded for that more. And it's like, I think it's just frustrating to me when I see that. Other people who I think are really taking up interesting spaces in fashion right now are Alex Consani, I think is a really interesting one. And then also these two TikTokers, Kit and Callum, who make videos together. Starting with Alex Consani, I would argue that right now, maybe she is the closest thing we have to a supermodel. Like she is a model through and through. And like she happens to make videos on the internet every once in a while, but like because she is known for being a model and like she really does her craft amazingly well. Like if you look at her on a runway or I think she did this recent, I think it was Jacques Mousse or Loewe, I can't remember, campaign. And like she was so perfect in it. Like the campiness of it, how it was kind of satirical and crazy and over the top, but like on purpose. Like she was such a great talent for that because of her sense of humor and what she represents and things she's done in the past. And like, I like something like that. And also I think, again, talking about Kit and Callum, what I think are so interesting of these are two guys who were models before they were creators and really blew up for documenting the inside of what this industry looks like. And in some ways, it's really cool and fun and exciting that in some ways they subtly show how it's a little scary, and how he's like has to wake up at 5 a.m. to like run 3 miles just to do a casting so that their body looks like perfect, just so they can maybe get an opportunity. Like that's crazy. That is crazy. And it's interesting to see that documented. You know what I mean? And they make sense to me as being, put in these realms of like interesting fashion because one, they are employees of the industry in whatever way, like they actually do that, and I really hope that we see more people like this with like designers and stylists and, like I would love to see more people or journalists, fashion journalists too, like that really have like education or knowledge or some sort of background or lived experience coming through this industry, get some of these opportunities in that way. However, a very important thing I would like to mention, and a pattern I don't know if you've noticed, is all of these are thin white people. Like pretty much all of them are conventionally attractive, paper thin white people. And that is a really terrifying thing for the world of fashion. Again, talking about how they really market to a specific category and we know who that is and why is scary. And it's like a clear, palpable thing, the amount of POC and Black creators you see in any sort of environment like this compared to the ones who aren't. And also, I think too, how like in order for any sort of like, or even a plus size creator to get to these stages, they have to have so much talent, like good storytelling and like a unique perspective on fashion and also a large follower account to, again, talking about these people like Hailey Bieber and Sophia Richie, who are just Nepo babies, really got kind of given a lot of the opportunities and audience they have. And to, I wouldn't say I have the most unique perspective on fashion. Like it's a really sad thing for me to see. And I think it's important to call out again too, because I am not getting invited to the fucking Met Gala. You know what I mean? So like, I'm not worried about what Vogue thinks of me. Like, it's not gonna happen, you know? So like, I don't know. I think it's interesting for creators like not in these fields to talk about that thing too, because those people have this pressure, you know, like they have this pressure of how they monetize and that their monetization is going to be impacted. But talking about this idea of, you know, I was trying to think, okay, like what are two like Black creators or POC creators that are women specifically. Also, I just think I have less knowledge of like women's fashion in general because the fashion I consume is, again, like Wisdom and Drew, who make men's fashion because those are the things that I watch or can wear. So I was trying to think of like, okay, like what are some POC women? And two of the ones that popped to my mind were Nara Smith and Gabriette. And an interesting thing I was starting to have about this thought was like, it's interesting that these two girls are not fashion creators, but are only given these fashion opportunities, I would say, because one, extremely thin, two, beautiful, so conventionally attractive, and three, really lean into this sort of like trad wife phenomena or this concept of like the ideal woman that like they are super beautiful and stay home and cook for their partner. Like that's what a lot of their content is. And again, I'm not trying to say that to like shit on both of them. Like if they have a passion for cooking, that's awesome and that's beautiful. And again, cooking is an art form as well. But like when I'm thinking about these big brands who are like so willing to give something to like an Alex Earl or like a Hailey Bieber or whatever, but like very, very less POC and, you know, by POC creators. And then that out of that select very few by POC creators aren't even really people talking about fashion that much, but are people who embody this idea of the perfect woman from the male gaze. It's like, it's just weird. I don't know. And what it boils down to is the fashion industry sells this idea of aspiration. They are talking about this halo effect that you will be beautiful if you wear this. Look at all these beautiful women wearing this. If you want to be perceived in the way that they're perceived, you have to wear this. And that's a really scary thing. And what is sad to me is that I think we're not seeing brands who really embody a unique perspective anymore. Like, you know, I remember in the mall era, like Hot Topic, I felt like had such a cult-like following compared to these brands like, you know, H&M or American Eagle or whatever, because like you knew who identified with Hot Topic and why, right? It was the alt rock girl. She had dyed hair and like she wore different makeup and like different shows and different music. Like you can almost build a profile for somebody who shops at Hot Topic in your mind. And I'm not sure you can necessarily do that for all these other brands. And when I think about the future of the fashion industry, I really do think that we're going to see these brands who are smart enough to realize that. You know, again, I think another great example of someone who's done this well is Converse. Converse, once upon a time, used to be a basketball shoe, and they were losing so much money because basketball players stopped wearing Converse because it's a terrible shoe for basketball until they really thought about who is wearing our product now. It's a thin sole shoe. It was worn by mostly skaters. So they rebranded their entire brand to being catered towards skaters and this like specific subculture of people who resonated with the product and understood why they resonated with the product, because it was actually like a functional thing. Again, like a very flat shoe, very thin shoe is what you want for skating. So they completely rebranded it. It completely exploded their brand. And like they have been a timeless brand ever since then. And that's because they knew the subculture that they identified with. And what I hope the takeaway from this video is, again, is not me trying to speak ill of any of these people. I hate doing that. But to understand that like if you want to build a community, you have to speak to the needs of that community. Look at these brands like, you know, Converse or Hot Topic or whatever, just as random examples that popped in my mind. But I understand who they're for, why they're for. And again, when I talk about all these concepts of arts, I talked about it a lot in the Influencer to Pop Star episode, like having a POV is so important. And I think these people who focus more on quantity and numbers over quality and that depth of connection are going to end up shorting themselves in the long run. And if they really want to be successful, they need to be investing in these people who actually have that unique POV, speak to a specific community of people, and can deliver conversions and a passion and you know, excitement for that brand because they invested in that person who represents them. So I hope this was interesting. Again, I know this is not a fashion channel, but I was so obsessed with this and I love making the little video essays and doing research on stuff like this. So please subscribe. So close to 50K. Oh my God. Please, 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 please join the Discord. It's going to be the pinned comment. And yeah, I'll see y'all next week. Bye.